This is the Decision Point with Anand Nanduri. Anand, we had the draft. We were there. You were there. I was there in Detroit. Some teams did well. Some teams did poorly. Let's break it down.
Good to be back, man.
Feeling good. Feeling great. Feeling relaxed. I've had a full night's sleep. No alcohol. That's a big change from last week when I was my body fell asleep at 3 a.m. filled with alcohol. So that's a bit different feeling. I still got up and ran though. Nick Coder and I we're getting up and getting our miles in, which felt great. And a bunch of guys are going to the gym. So this is a very impressive group of humans that we are with here. So some of these GMs were impressive, others not so much. And I think we can just run through the full catalog of teams. And then along the way, we'll mention, hey, is this one of our top 5 drafts? And then, at the end, I'm sure we'll have approximately 8 teams in our top 5 and 8 teams in our bottom 5. And that's just how it works. That's just how it goes. That's what happens with Arizona. They get Marvin Harrison Jr. That was a chalk pick. They did not move out. That's how much they loved him. That's why he's our wide receiver 1 on our Dynasty rankings. Check him out, Dynasty Deluxe on playerprofiler.com. We actually have a gap between Harrison and Neighbors. That's how much we love Harrison. And then the rest of their draft was just stockpiled with players. They chose not to trade out of some of these picks and just make them all. 3 picks, 4 picks in the 3rd round. They just kept picking, man. They just kept picking. So this is a very difficult draft to grade because they had so many goddamn picks. So you can't call it. I see, but the Arizona Cardinals had a top 3 draft. No, they didn't. Okay,
they drafted a third of the players.
on a per pick basis, you can't say that. That's not true. Okay, it's objectively not true. I think they did well. I think they could have fucked it up and didn't, and I think that is half the battle. So what do you think about the Cardinals draft?
Yeah, you can't really win championships on draft day because you got to develop these kids. It's not like they're ready to go day one. But you can certainly lose Super Bowl windows on draft weekend, and Arizona did not lose the draft. So obviously Marv Harrison Jr., Darius Robinson, late riser, edge rusher from Missouri, Max Melton, the DB from Rutgers. People love him. I love him too. There are a lot of players in this draft class, like just a couple of day 3 highlights, like Isaiah Adams, the guard from Illinois. Dadrian Taylor Demerson, the safety from Texas Tech. There's a lot of stuff here. It's very clear that there's an adult in the room now in Monty Austinfort, where
yes.
Steve Keim was not an adult. Sorry. Let the kids play with Hot Wheels. Leave this shit to the adults.
I loved just edge, corner, line, edge, corner, line. I like that. I like that a lot. And they mixed in some random wide receivers like Tejon Palmer and some edge rushers like the Xavier Thomas from Clemson. So here's how it works. If you draft an edge rusher from Clemson in the 5th round or a cornerback from Clemson in the 5th round, he's not going to do anything. Okay, that's not where you mine value. You do not mine value from Ohio State and Alabama and Texas. So to go Christian Jones and Xavier Thomas back-to-back in the 5th round, I didn't like that because if I'm drafting that kind of player, then it's going to have to be a guy from a small school because that's the only way you're going to find value. Like you didn't see something, I promise you, Arizona, you didn't see something in Xavier Thomas or Christian Jones that the other 31 teams didn't see, okay? But I will say, I did find it very interesting. The Tip Riemann pick was a reach, but anytime you got a guy that's 270 pounds that can play tight end but can also play tackle and move around like a 3rd tackle on the field, but as a blocker, I think that's interesting. And I talked to Rich Rebar yesterday on the Mind of Mansion show, and he mentioned that a lot of these teams are going to be moving more to jumbo personnel to combat the dime packages that these defenses are continuing to throw at them. So you're going to see more jumbo sets, and that's what Tip Riemann's all about. And then you're also going to see more fullback usage this year. And so that's something just to look out for, a trend in the NFL to look out for. So Arizona, I think they were good, not great. I think we can agree with that. They're not in the top 5. They're not in the bottom 5. They did their thing. If it were me, I would have banked more of these picks. I would have made more phone calls and picked up more 2025 and 2026 picks, but that's just me. If I did run a franchise, you and I would run it together, and it would be amazing. Much better than these other guys, except maybe Howie Roseman, Chris Ballard. We'll get to them in a little bit. Atlanta, next on the list. I didn't like this draft, and it really has nothing to do with Michael Penix.
The Mike Penix pick is not the problem here. The problem was the foresight involved in all of this. If you had Michael Penix rated where they had him, and you have pick 8 overall, and you know that it's going to require someone trading in front of you to go get him, paying Kirk Cousins $100 million coming off of an Achilles tear is the problem. It's not Michael Penix Jr. at 8. That's not even the pick that I hate in this draft. The pick that I hate in this draft is the next pick that they made. They traded up for Rucororo from Clemson. And the problem is here, again, when you're drafting, what you were saying is I value this player more than 31 other teams do. Because if not, they would have moved up and taken him. What you are betting is that your scouting eval on this player is correct, and you're assessing the right capital to take him. This was wrong, functionally. Not a lot of people had Rucororo over Johnny Newton from the interior lineman from Illinois. And so when you go against consensus in this manner, not only are you betting that you're right, you're betting that you're right over 31 other people. And I don't know that Atlanta has the leeway for us to sit there and say, okay, yeah, you've earned the goodwill to be able to go do that. To me, that's just, it's arrogance. And more than anything else, if Johnny Newton's medicals scare you, fine. But I am not sitting there and taking an interior D lineman that's not Johnny Newton in the top 10 picks of the second round. It's just not happening. You're putting top 40 draft capital into a guy that, a lot of people had as a late day 2 pick. I mean, it's a reach for many reasons, but the process was bad. And even if the process was bad, take the better player. You should have taken Johnny Newton. And that's one of the picks that I hated most in this entire draft, period.
I also did not like the Braylon Trice pick because of the Mazi Smith pick, earlier. Well, in earlier years. Was that last year? That's just last year, 2 years. It was either last year or 2 years ago. I think it was last year. Dallas takes Mazi Smith, which was a mistake. Which D tackle in the first round. Woof. Right? Yeah, we got. If you're trying to stop the run in the first round, you're already losing. Okay. So if you're trying to bolster your run game or stop the run in the first round, you've failed. Okay, that's a mistake. So Mazi Smith shows up to Cowboys camp 30 pounds lighter than he was during the pre-draft process. And the Cowboys coaches were like, why? What? You stopped eating after the draft, you asshole? And then Mazi Smith is just relegated and not useful at all to them. And that is the great risk with these D tackles. These D tackles are so impossible to forecast, which is why you're seeing less and less of them in the first round, because they know. Braylon Trice had the same problem. Braylon Trice, through the process, was thought to be, at least 260. He was listed at 271, 274 by Washington on the website. He actually checked in finally at 245. They finally weighed him, and he was 245. He dropped the same number of pounds, but luckily the NFL caught it, right? The thing is, if he had just kept eating right through the process, through the combine, just keep eating through the combine, dude. That's all you got to do. So it was real. It was a huge concern that the guy is an edge rusher at 245. If you take that guy as a project that guy typically is a 5th round pick. Well, you take him in the early 3rd round. That's just bad value.
I love Braylon Trice, the player, is awesome. The kid from Washington, love his game. But the process here is just bad, Matt. It's bad process to take that guy in round 3. If he'd still filled out and if he'd still played at 270, we're talking about a totally different situation.
He was never 270.
Like that, the tape doesn't lie to you.
Fraudulent. And then he went into he was in the college football playoffs. So then he has all this extra vividness bias.
There you go. That's another thing that we do a lot in media, right? Especially when we talk about grading draft picks. Going up a level is a different step, right? Bo Nix torching Pac-12 defenses versus playing in the NFL is a drastically different task. They're not the same thing. When you're terrorizing Conference USA tackles as an edge rusher, that's not the same thing that you're going to see in the NFL. It's drastically different. You can't compare the two at all. And that's why it's such a projection. That's why the draft can be such a crapshoot. Is you see this awesome player and you see them play really, really, really well against subpar competition. You're like, okay, that's who he is. That's why, when we contextualized CJ Stroud last year, when we were telling you, hey, this is the number 1 quarterback, it's not because of what he did against fucking Indiana. Nobody cares. You have superior athletes to Indiana. It's what he did against Georgia. It's what he did against Michigan. And sure, you're not going to win all of those games. It's the same knock that people had against Drake May and Caleb Williams this year. Well, they didn't win enough games. It's a team sport, guys. They're not comparable. Like USC's roster, offensively and defensively, is not comparable to Oregon's. The only thing that USC had to throw against Oregon was we have Caleb Williams. The only thing Drake May had against Clemson, the only thing UNC had against Clemson is, well, we have Drake May. like guys, you not a winner versus winner arguments. Yes, they matter to NFL front offices. I promise you there are several GMs that had JJ McCarthy winner written on their draft board. And there is some truth to that. There are guys that inspire confidence in other dudes, but that's not quantifiable. That's not something that we can measure.
Get out of here. Get out. Anyway, let's get off Atlanta. They had a bottom 3 draft by most by me, according to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, sorry, Atlanta.
Maybe you have a different team in a different set of teams. We do. We have different sets of teams in our bottom 3. We may or may not agree with Atlanta. We'll summarize this at the end of the show, where who exactly we have in the bottom 3, the bottom 5. Atlanta, for me, at least in the bottom 5, might be bottom 3. We'll see how it shakes out by the end of the show. Baltimore, I'm pretty sure is going to be in my top 5 because I love getting Wiggins at 30. This is my favorite thing about Baltimore. 30, 30, 30, 30. They had one trade up for Tez Walker, which is cool, right? And then just sticking at 30, just stick and pick. And then who are they picking? Roger Rose Garden. Right? Now, not all Washington players were overrated. Like Rome Odunze was a great pick. Roger Rose Garden, great pick. Right? This is what you want. You just want one of these meaty, right tackle. Like I love right tackle too. If you're going to be drafting a tackle at the end of the 2nd, 3rd round, make him a right tackle. Like don't try to swing and hit a home run on some left tackle in the late 2nd round. If you just get realistic that, hey, we're going to move this guy to guard, or probably this guy's going to play right tackle for us, that's going to end up being a better pick. And just down the board, I love how the first 2 picks really are what elevate Baltimore's draft. They got such incredible value just staying put and just soaking up the value as it came to them. What did you like about the Baltimore draft?
You haven't even touched on one of my favorite picks they made. Adisa Isaac, the edge rusher from Penn State. I mean, have you looked at the guys that they've been putting in the league the last couple of years? They've got another one coming next year. He's going to be a top 10 pick, and Abdul Carter, freak of nature. Baltimore, one of the things that, Ozzie Newsome did so well as Ravens GM was identify where to take the ranges that you take certain players that we talk about. You want to take an edge rusher with upside in the late 3rd round, make it a guy that has proven at a significant level that they can do that. Or make it some small school player you've never heard of. How do I know Adisa Isaac's going to be good? Because he's going to fucking Baltimore. This is what they do. Defender goes to Baltimore. They're going to be good. They're going to be good. That's what they do there. If you take a receiver, if you're Pittsburgh and you take Roman Wilson's probably going to be fucking good, man. I don't think that's what they do in Pittsburgh. Tez Walker, North Carolina, subject of a lot of NCAA bullshit. It's a tough pick to assess just because we didn't really get to see him as much as we wanted to. TJ Tampa from Iowa State was a lot of people's best player available in day 3, period. Rasheen Ali from Marshall. I mean, you're just talking about value. And so when Ozzie handed things over to Eric DaCosta, it was just more of the same. Baltimore, that's how you know. Again, this is how you know that you have a team that has a bright future. Ownership, head coach, general manager, all aligned. And all you see everywhere down their draft board is value. And you see a guy and you're like, oh, yeah, that's a Baltimore Raven. Adisa Isaac, yeah, that's a Raven.
I didn't love Buffalo's draft. I didn't like the Keon Coleman pick. Straight up, Keon Coleman, the first pick in the second round, is a reach. That was a reach. You want to take Ladd McConkey there, you want to take Adonai Mitchell there, that's fine. But objectively, Keon Coleman is a project. We're hoping that he's faster than he tested. We're hoping that maybe he's Allen Robinson. Hoping maybe, I don't know, we'll see. He is a throwback ex-receiver from a different era. I don't love it. Cole Bishop, I think, is exactly what they needed. That was just a straight up, straight ahead need pick. Good for you. Then you go Dwayne Carter, an undersized 6'2", 300-pound D tackle in the third round. Again, those guys are available on day 3. I didn't, love that they just stockpiled all these late round picks. Maybe some of them hit. That's fine. That's good. They focused a lot on edge, on line. If you get a center from Georgia,
it's my favorite pick they made.
Right, that was a good pick, but otherwise, I like Travis Clayton. Right, I think this Buffalo, if you had to grade their draft, probably in that 15 to 20 range, just very average. Nothing that you're like, oh, this was when you don't pick well with your first pick, that's always a problem. And they traded back. They got these extra picks, and that was impressive. So they got half the job done. The trading back was a great move. Keep trading back, get out of the first round, and you still get a great wide receiver. The problem is they had a couple on the board. They didn't take one. And then they did get Travis Clayton, who I thought should have gone earlier. This guy runs a 4.8 at 307 pounds. It doesn't matter how much true American football experience this guy has. You need that guy on your roster. The fact that he fell to the 7th round was a gift to them. He should have gone in the 6th at least. So that was a cool pick. So impressive pick. But if your most impressive pick to me is in the 7th round, I mean, you're at best like a mid-range draft.
Yeah, this is a C, somewhere between a C plus, C minus, however you want to look at it.
Travis Clayton takes it from a C to a C plus.
Yeah, I mean, figure it out however you want to put it in there, but it's not like anything is blowing you away about this draft.
Carolina had a very bad draft.
Oh, God.
Carolina's draft was very, 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 very bad, and I mean, truly, truly, truly bad.
This is tough to look at, truthfully. I mean, running back in the 2nd round is a luxury that Carolina cannot afford. Xavier Legette, again, you're trying so hard to find an archetype, right? You're chasing the high of what you've seen others do. All right, well, the Bengals have a T. Higgins. We didn't get to trade for him, so let's just draft our T. Higgins. No, that's not how this works.
They tried that last year.
It's not how any of this works.
They're on tilt. Carolina is tilting. You're clearly
this is not
tilting.
how this works.
And you know you're tilting when you have this. You get dealt the same hand, and you double down on that same hand again, right? And you lose again. And that's what tilting is. You just can't get off certain cards. What are you doing? Xavier Legette, really? Really?
How did I like Xavier Legette, the player, in round 2. What are you doing drafting him in round 1?
Oh, a guy that didn't produce for 3 straight years. It's just, the data is clear. If you have one of these hedge fund equity holders running your franchise, right? You would think that they would implement data-based decision-making down the organization. That's why I expected Carolina to get a lot better, a lot faster. And yet, no, they're doing these crazy things where they're drafting linebackers and they're taking huge, like, Patriots wide receiver style swings. Like, Patriots from 5 years ago would have taken Xavier Legette. In fact, I did hear that the Patriots wanted Xavier Legette, and that's why Carolina drafted him, because they were afraid the Patriots were going to grab him. And I'm like, you guys, you fell for this. So they fell for the banana in the tailpipe all the way, the whole way. I mean, it's compounded by the fact that they didn't have a first-round pick, which would have been the first overall pick, would have been Caleb Williams. So they're still paying for the big mistake of last year, trading up for Bryce Young. Then to go running back in the second round. I love Jonathan Brooks for fantasy. But, again, if you're strengthening your run game and you're stopping the run with your second and third round picks with Jonathan Brooks and Trevin Wallace, respectively, then you're failing. You're failing. The only pick I liked was Jatavian Sanders. Jatavian Sanders was great value. There was a lot of weapons at Texas. He would have been even more productive had he been on a different team. As the first pick in the fourth round, though, that is the best pick to trade. That is because you have all night to talk to GMs that want to move up and get their favorite guy in the early fourth. So typically, the smart GMs will trade the 401. Like that pick is usually gone. Like you almost never see that the team actually use the pick unless they're on tilt.
Day 2 and day 3, if you are a team, whoever has the 101 in any given year, thanks for giving it away, Carolina. That's one of the worst trades in NFL history, by the way. By the way, in that trade, the thing that nobody talks about, they owe Chicago their 2025 second. They're still paying for it next year, too.
Oh, yeah.
God. But the biggest problem that you have, if you have the 101, is usually you're not in Chicago's situation where they have, their GM established, whatever. Most of the time, that's either house clearing or you have a first-time GM that's never made a draft pick before, and, they have the 101. So what do? They take the pick, and then they take the pick again, and then they take the pick in day 3. The best thing that you could possibly do is get on the phone, call everybody. Shout out to Tyler. Call everybody and auction it off to the highest bidder. Yes. You have the 101 because you fucking suck, not because you're good at what you do.
Right.
You usually have the 101 because you suck.
Yeah.
and
the reason why
you need more resources to stop sucking. Stop trying to take the pick at 201. Stop trying to take the pick at 401. Trade the fuck out. Somebody is falling in love with something. I promise. There are teams that had first-round grades on somebody. There is no reason to take that pick at 201. And they didn't even take the pick at 201. They traded to 132. Not only did you not get value for the 201, you paid value to overdraft a receiver whose profile does not suggest they're a first-round pick.
The argument is that they didn't give up much at all to move up one spot. That's not what matters. What matters is the underlying process. If you're doing that, if you're making that move, it reveals that you are playing the game scared as a general manager and that you are on tilt and your process is bad. You need to let teams fuck up in front of you. You can't be the team that's fucking up and that they're stepping over, right? The Carolina is laying in the mud on draft day and other teams are just stepping on them so that their shoes don't get dirty.
Like, if you look at this, theoretically, if I tell you just hypothetically, hey, Matt, they've swapped one draft spot and the two teams involved are the Carolina Panthers and the Buffalo Bills, whose process do you trust more?
Yeah, it's embarrassing. It's just...
And I mean, you don't have to love Keon Coleman, the draft pick. The way that Buffalo went about maneuvering the draft was great. I'm not the biggest fan of Coleman at 33, but the process to get there from 28 to 32 to 33 was brilliant.
I'm going to enjoy watching Xavier Legette, Jonathan Mingo, and Terrace Marshall compete for the wide receiver 3 position. Like who's going to be in there in 3 receiver sets? Will it be Leggett? Will it be Mingo? Will it be Marshall? And then we're going to watch, a Cam Sims, an Amir Smith-Marset come in, make plays in preseason. This is what's going to happen. I'm explaining to you what's going to happen. Michael Strachan, right? These guys are going to come in and they're going to make plays. David Moore, they're going to come in and they're gonna start getting snaps, and people are gonna lose their mind. You're like, what about Leggett? What about me? And it's like, no, these guys they don't understand where to be and how to squeeze the football in these particular scenarios. They can't separate all these problems that those types of receivers always have. If Terrace Marshall had the right mentals and the right work ethic, okay, then he would be already a star in the league. He'd have a 1,000-yard season, and they would never need to draft Xavier Leggett because they would already have 3 receivers they love.
They're chasing the profile they're chasing is that of a DK Metcalf and a T. Higgins.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. This is why these teams don't draft an Adonai Mitchell. The reason why people are so apoplectic about the slide of Adonai Mitchell and then him going to the Colts, we're going to talk about in a little bit, and how his dynasty value just got buried, absolutely buried. Now, some people are practicing this cognitive dissonance and they don't want to believe it, right? They're talking to themselves some story about how at some point Adonai Mitchell is gonna save his value. It's not going to happen. Like, it's over. But the reason why this happens is because you're right. These NFL teams chase archetypes. We have our slot guy. We have our flanker. We need an X receiver. So the best X receiver on our board is Xavier Leggett, even though Xavier Leggett is not a first-round pick and he's not a second-round pick. So you can't draft according to your greatest need and the best player available, because the best player available at your greatest need might not have a grade that's in the same universe as 20 other guys that you could pick.
I mean, Adonai Mitchell was the chalk pick there.
Yes, but he didn't fit their need. He would have been redundant with Adam Thielen and or Deontay Johnson for a year, and they felt like they had a need with Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall. Do you remember the Lions? They just kept trying to go after X receivers and failing. It was Charles Rogers and it was Mike Williams, and they were using top 10 picks.
Yeah, Roy Williams,
and they were just busting. And then finally they said, we're gonna use this second overall on Calvin Johnson, and Calvin Johnson finally hit, and it set a precedent that's like, hey, it's okay if you keep failing at a position and you feel yourself tilting, just keep drafting it. Just draft your way out of it. It worked with Calvin Johnson, even though I would argue drafting any receiver 2 overall is a reach. Receiver is not valuable enough to be drafted 2 overall, generally speaking, even if it's a generational talent like Calvin Johnson. But it set a bad precedent that told NFL hey, you can keep failing. You just draft your way out of it. Right,
we're never going to get
Carolina Panthers are trying to do. They're trying to draft their way out of their X receiver problem, and that is a terrible approach.
It's a bad process. And again, Calvin Johnson is the cleanest receiver prospect we have ever seen. So when we're talking about these one-offs, the Calvin Johnson picks, that's not as much process as it is he's just so much better than anyone else we've ever seen that we have to take him. And in that case, sure, do it, whatever. But when you're talking about taking a guy at 32 that's probably should have been drafted closer to 62, and the guy that you should have taken in Adonai Mitchell, right? If you're just purely taking receiver, if you're locked into receiver, the guy you should have taken is Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell went 20 picks later. 20.
I know. We're just explaining to the people how these mistakes happen, how the sausage is made. This is how it happens. Okay, you want to know why these picks get made and how these reaches happen? That's how they happen. I can't really evaluate the Bears draft because they had 2 top 10 picks and then only 3 other picks outside of that. I love that they traded some picks. And I love that they're continuing to bank picks in the future. So for that reason, I think that you got to give them also credit for making the trade last year and having 2 top 10 picks. Pairing Caleb Williams with Rome Odunze, I think is a genius move. And I also, if you're going to take a tackle in the 3rd round, do you think that I think he should be from Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, or do you think he should be from Yale?
Yale.
You're going to take a tackle in the 3rd round, he better be from fucking Yale, man. And I love that. So I love the Bears, but it's a difficult. I just say, hey, we'll just post them up at like draft 10. They did a good job, definitely above average, but there's just not enough there to really evaluate.
No, I mean, I think they did very well with the things that they do have with the picks that they made. There's no like really egregious, terrible pick. You know, you can talk about Torrey Taylor, a punter in the 4th round. I'm not in love with the process there, but other than that, I mean, you're talking about the guy that's been labeled a generational punter. You drafted the entire Iowa offense, one player. You know, what could be better value than that? But other than that, I mean, Austin Booker in round 5, they trade back in to get him. There's Caleb and Odunze are what make this, obviously, but Kieran Amagaji in round 3 is really, really good value, and I think he's going to be a good player. There is no scenario, and I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but like, I want people to understand, no first overall pick has ever gone to a situation this good. Like the runway is clear. Caleb Williams can hit the ground running.
Exquisite. Now the Bengals, Amarius Mims, a project upside, like he could be the best tackle or he could be Mekhi Becton. We don't know. We'll see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Chris Jenkins, a tackle in the 2nd round. I think that's early for a tackle who's not even 300 pounds. Then they double down on upside, though. They go another tackle in the 3rd round, which I just think is I actually much prefer that because that guy's like 326. So they're setting themselves up for 2 big busts with their 1st and 2nd round picks. I love swinging for upside, trust me, but I like to dabble on upside. I like to say, okay, this guy's falling, and we're going to go ahead and push the button because we want to make sure that we have our upside bucket filled from the draft. But to just go YOLO and go all upside every pick when you have Burrow and you have Chase and you have a nice nucleus, I think that was bad strategy. So I didn't agree. Like, they just kept doing it, right? They were addicted to upside. This team's addicted to upside.
You didn't even mention the most upside.
I know, Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton's a great pick, but guess what? If he hits, big deal. You have a 2nd receiver, right?
Yeah.
The nice thing about Jermaine Burton is, for other teams, let's say Carolina drafted him, right? Well, then you potentially have your alpha. Then it's worth it. But the ceiling on Jermaine Burton is your number 2 receiver. So even then, this upside addiction that I don't know why the Bengals feel this way. I don't know. It seemed to me like a very insecure draft where we're going to take the biggest tackle and we're going to take the national champion D tackle and we're going to take the guy that couldn't stick on any college team for any length of time because he was problematic and intersected with law enforcement off the field and all these things. I just can't do it, man. I can't get behind this draft. I have to have it deep into the 20s because, again, it's just the overarching strategy I disagree with. Tactically, I like these 2 picks, these first 2 picks, if they weren't the exact 2 picks that were made, if that makes sense. Yeah, I just think that these are picks you mix in with much more stable picks.
Yeah, I mean, they swung big, and if they all hit, this is going to be talked about as one of the better draft classes in the history of that franchise. But again, you're walking up to the plate saying, "I'm going yard," or I'm striking out. So, I mean, I hope for their sake that they hit. Mims is a really fun player. Chris Jenkins, again, how much of it is the guys that played next to him? He's really good. No doubt about that. Jermaine Burton, if he sticks, like there's your T. Higgins replacement. Congrats. You now have your number 2. It's an interesting draft to say the least. I really like Eric All, the tight end out of Iowa. He was a Michigan guy for a while. Josh Newton, the corner from TCU, Tanner McLaughlin. You are starting to see, if we're talking about these early day 3 picks that a lot of these teams are making, and you're noticing a trend of tight end. And it is. Rich talked about it on Mind of Mansion, where teams are going back to 12 personnel. They're going back to 13. They're playing bully ball. And fullback is going to become more important. Tight end is going to become more important because your sub-package linebackers being 230 pounds is going to lead to us running the ball right at you.
What about Cleveland?
Cleveland is an interesting one. I want to love it. I want to. I'm trying to figure out here, all things considered, when you gave up as much as you gave up for Watson, you just don't have the capital to do a ton. That's the scary part about Cleveland is, when you're without first-round picks for as long as they've been, the Rams got productive players for those first-round picks. Right now, the Browns have gotten half a season realistically out of Deshaun Watson. If he ends up being what he is, that trade is contextualizing the entire franchise right now. The reason they don't have a number 1 is because they have Deshaun Watson. So their first pick is round 2, and they take Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State. Really good player, flashed a ton. Obviously, I've watched a lot of him. But he's really young. He's 20 still. And, he's going to be a very productive player long-term. But will he ever hit the ceiling that you want out of a second-round pick? I don't know. We haven't seen it consistently. Zach Center, the guard from Michigan, really good player, catastrophic injury at the end in that Ohio State game last year. And, you're basically betting that he'll come back and be, what he was. That's why you got the discount. He was probably a day 1 guy, or early day 2 before the injury. There's just not a ton here to sink your teeth into, just because they don't have a ton of draft capital. I mean, Jamari Thrash, the receiver from Louisville, Nate Watson, linebacker from Mississippi State, Harden, the corner from South Dakota, and then Joan Briggs, D-tackle from Cincinnati. Like, they have no luxury picks simply because, one, the roster's pretty good. It's not like the team sucks. The roster's pretty good, but there's just not a lot to go off of here. They're upside picks. There are guys that, you're kind of trying to figure out what they're going to do with. It's just an interesting draft. I don't know. The only grade that I can give this one is incomplete, just because there's, much like the Bears, there just isn't enough here to really sink your teeth into.
Here's what I think about the Cleveland draft. I don't care. Dallas. Tyler Guyton. Solid pick, right? Can't argue with this. 6'8" tackle. How could it fills a need? Then they came right back with an even better pick, Cooper Beebe, to take a nasty factor, 320. I love guards that are 6'2" or 6'3", that are not 6'4", 6'5", with the nasty factor. And then, maybe they can switch to center if they need to. There's all these. The Cooper Beebe pick was awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
He was a guy that many people highlighted in, last year in college football and 2 years ago in college football is one of the nastiest players out there.
Yeah, I mean, just nasty. Just complete and utter nastiness. Then they go with, Louisiana tackle later, 330 pounds. That's what you do. You want developmental tackle is 330 pounds. Take him in the 7th round from Louisiana. That's perfect. It's not Louisiana State. That's the key. It can't be LSU. If it's LSU, it's a failed pick. He's going to bust 100%. If he's from Louisiana, you have a chance. Southeast Missouri State wide receiver, Wake Forest cornerback. These are great overall, just increasing your probability of hits in the later rounds and just going with what you need. And the best pick of all, I love this pick. I love the draft.
I know where you're
this
going.
Draft. Such a meat and potatoes draft. A Western Michigan edge rusher at close to 270 pounds, who is explosive and strong, who if he went to a big school would have gone easily in the first round. You get him at the end of the second. Chef's kiss with Marshawn Nealon.
Marshawn Nealon was one of the guys that, several people that I talked to had up there with Latu and Turner as one of the best edge rushers in this class. So to get that kind of talent simply because he was Western Michigan in the mid to late second is just silly. That's one of the better.
Awesome pick. Just
It's
awesome.
my favorite pick they made by far.
Yeah, I mean, those two picks back to back to go with the Western Michigan edge rusher, and then the slightly undersized, nasty guard. It was just I'm like, this is so unlike the Jerry of old. The new Jerry is so good at this. It's scary, and you just know the Cowboys are coming.
Yeah.
So if you're in the
Building
NFC,
the wall,
watch
man.
out for the Cowboys. Watch out. These are they are doing it right, man. They are doing it right.
They are building a wall in Texas.
They are. And I have a team that's doing it wrong, and we'll talk about it after this. Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it. The Denver Broncos.
Oh, boy.
Woof. How? Why? So bad. So bad.
I want, first of all, Denver fans are awesome. They're great people. They'll invite you to tailgates. They love their team. They're diehards, right? This is not a casual fan base. The product that they've been subjected to post Peyton Manning is shameful. This is a proud organization. This is a championship organization. How the fuck did we get here? We're now, this is where we are with the Denver Broncos. We've traded for a coach, traded multiple firsts for a quarterback who by all metrics was average at best while he was there. We shipped out our former first-round pick wide receiver in Jerry Jeudy. There are reports that Sutton might be moved.
No, they need to blow it up, Anand. They need to blow it up, but guess what? They hired one of these aging savior dictator coaches, and now he's drafting for his job. This was a death rattle pick. The last guy, honestly, the last guy they should have been selecting, the last player on their board should have been Bo Nix. This team is not ready for a quarterback. This team needs to blow the whole thing up. They need to look for a franchise left tackle. That's the pick that they should have made. Right? You got to start at the foundation, start at the point of attack, and start building your way out. And then in a couple years, you can bring in the quarterback, and then you have a fully rebuilt team. But because their coach is influencing the selections, and he is desperate to maintain his job, and he's going to be fired. Like, Peyton Manning is not long for this league. He's going to be. Did I say Peyton Manning? Sean Payton is not long for this league. Like, he will be back in the booth very soon. But in the meantime, he's going to take this franchise down with him, and it's embarrassing. It's just because they didn't have the luxury. They didn't have a second-round pick. They have needs everywhere. The only play there was to trade down 10 picks or so, trade out of the first round, get a treasure trove of additional picks this year and next year, get the hell out of there. if you the worst possible move was to make the pick and then burn it on a quarterback with a second round grade, it's just so pukey. It's and then to just, we're gonna help him with his college receiver that scouts absolutely despise throughout the process. It's just so awful. And whenever you see a franchise this mismanaged by a dictator coach, it's a 5+ year process to get it back on the rails and to a place where the team can be competitive again. They're a couple years away from being even moving in the right direction. Right? You ever seen a train turnstile? You ever seen that?
No.
They have to at some points turn an engine around. Okay? So sometimes an engine, a locomotive, is heading east and it's delivered its cargo and they need to use it to go west. But you can't have an engine going backwards. So what do? They have a special turnstile that some train yards have where the train goes in there and then very slowly the whole track underneath in this disc turns 180 degrees. And it takes like 45 minutes, right? Because it's incredibly heavy. And so they have these huge chains and it's a really interesting process. And that's how I think about this, is that they have to take the train. They have to find a train yard. They have to park it. They have all these cars. They didn't have to disassemble the whole train. Then they have to take the engine and they have to slowly turn it. And this is a years-long process.
This is the problem with any kind of process that leads you to Bo Nix at 12. There is never a scenario where QB6 at pick 12 is a good decision. Because if everybody else has told you that there are 5 better quarterbacks than this guy, and he's available to you at 12, yes, it's the most important position in sports. No question about it. I don't even know that there's.
So you're going to fill it with Bo Nix?
And so the thing is, out of desperation,
Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert?
You're bringing Bo Nix to a Justin Herbert, Pat Mahomes fight. That's what. And the worst part of this is now you've locked yourself into him for a considerable period of time. You got to see what the kid's got. This is just QB6 at pick 12. You would have to have an all-time QB class, and maybe you think this is one. But it is very rare. Again, this is the draft to an extent is a social experiment. You are betting that you are right and 31 other teams are wrong. How often do you think that Bo Nix at pick 12 pays off?
Because this is what the smartest guy in the room does. This is what a Sean Payton's going to do.
It's your classic, I can fix him.
It's a joke. The whole thing, if I'm a Broncos fan, I'm looking at understand, the Broncos are further away than Carolina. They may be the furthest team away, right? Because even teams that we know are very far away, like the Saints, they've started making some good decisions. They've stopped trading up. Clearly their addiction to trading up and burning picks, they're starting to go through the recovery process, just like the Rams. They're going through the recovery process of making awful draft day decisions. Denver is so far away, so far away. And that's what we saw. We saw it with the Lions. Let's talk about the Lions draft. The Lions did the hard thing. They took the medicine, and it was years where they couldn't get out of bed, right? And they just had to keep tanking and keep taking those picks. And then eventually you look up, and they're a perennial playoff team. And now they're picking at 24 and potentially getting the best cornerback in the draft in Terrion Arnold. And then they're coming right back and getting another cornerback. They're just saying, what is our biggest need? We're going to double down on this. This is the luxury of having such a deep, talented roster.
This is one of my favorite drafts. I don't know if it's top 3, but it's one of my favorites. And it's when you have, and again, we talked about this with Arizona. the difference between having an adult in the room versus not having an adult in the room at GM is staggering. And even if you don't love, like we came out and said that, you know, if we swapped their day 2 picks with their day 1 picks last year, I love the class, just not the order that they were taken in. In this case, you get Terry and Arnold at 24. Who cares? The rest of the draft was awesome too. Who cares? Terry and Arnold at 24 is insane. I have no idea how he fell out of the top 15, much less the top 20. There were reports that people were considering taking him in the top 8. And now you're telling me that Detroit is able to take him at 24 in front of the hometown crowd. And then you double down with Rakestraw from Missouri. Really fun player. Giovanni Manu, the offensive tackle from British Columbia. You know, that's Matt's favorite pick of the draft.
Of course, you know that's one of my favorite picks. If it's an international guy, like take my opinion and my general sentiment on small school players as being values, double it if he's international.
Yeah.
Double it.
This is how a really good team stays a really good team. Because as you pay guys, you know, they just paid Penei Sewell. They just paid Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's discussions that they might pay Jared Goff. And once you pay those guys, you have to find value somewhere. And the value that you find is not in the free agent market. It's very rarely free agents that come at a value. It's drafting. That's where you find your value. That's how you fill out your roster. And this is now, year 4 in a row where we've really liked what the Lions have come out of the draft with in total, even if, you know, in terms of certain selections, we don't love taking one guy over another, but you walk out with the classes that they've walked out with in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. That's how you build a team that looks like the Lions. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, when we first did this show almost 3 years ago, we were talking about one of the first shows we did was how do we get to 2024 NFC North champion Detroit Lions?
Yeah.
And we worked it out.
We were talking about Brad Holmes on our first season of the show and how he's one of the best GMs in the league. And then at the draft, he was wearing a shirt that said positional villain. And that's because of the criticism he took last year, because he did really bad. 2 drafts in a row, really bad. You know, one-dimensional field stretcher in the first round, woof. Running back, woof. Linebacker, woof. But then, see, the thing is, he wears the shirt, but then he does the thing that you should be doing, which is identifying your biggest need, taking best player available at a position where the best player available at that position should go, like a Terry and Arnold, and then getting incredible value on a Rakestraw, right? We have a guy, you take the guy that's super solid. This is what I'm talking about. Remember I talked about the Bengals and how I didn't like how they were so addicted to upside in an unhealthy way. Terry and Arnold, high floor. Rakestraw, high ceiling. This is how you balance upside and stability, where you get a little bit of both, and you know you're going to hit. Now, no. There's a 20% chance neither of these guys hit. It's certainly possible, but you have a balanced portfolio of risk and reward. That's how you do it. And so Brad Holmes may want to wear the T-shirt as a joke, but what he did this year was very different, and he absolutely took advantage of positional value this year, different than last couple of years.
I think the biggest thing that I loved about the Lions was they saw value in the DB class this year, in Arnold and in Rakestraw, and it happened to fit their needs. They didn't just go push the button. They did not go full Carolina. It's, hey, we have a need here. We're just going to take the best player available on our board. Yeah, but Terry and Arnold was the best player available, period, at 24. Ennis Rakestraw in the 50s is one of the best players available on the board, period. We're not forcing square pegs into round holes here. I think that the thing that's so interesting is everybody, you know, we suffer from this too. The Lions are good now. So it's easy to forget just how fucking awful they were before they got good. We see the Browns. We see the Browns now. You know, you watch Kevin Stefanski. You look at Andrew Berry, and you're like, this is an analytically thinking, forward-facing organization. Yes, we hate the Deshaun Watson trade. But other than that, a lot of the stuff that they've done is stuff that we would advise you to do. it's easy to forget that they were fucking terrible before Baker Mayfield got there. Like one of the worst organizations in professional sports. We're talking about two of them that have totally flipped the script. And now you have organizations like Denver, where historically great, and you're looking at this team and you're sitting there and saying, what are fans paying money to see at this point? Bo Nix, Sean Payton? Man,
and especially when ownership is aging, like an Arthur Blank, it's even more egregious.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost elder abuse. Because it's like they only have a few years left, and I mean, if you had started the process of rebuilding the right way, as we begged Atlanta when we started the show, right? We started the show many years ago, praising Brad Holmes in the process, and we said, if only Atlanta could do the same thing. They're trying to microwave a rebuild, and they're not getting real. Had they gotten real, they could have secured potentially a championship for Arthur Blank, and they blew it because he's running out of time. The dude is old. I mean, he's for how old he is, the vitality is pretty impressive. But eventually, time is undefeated. Man, come on. So it's disheartening when you see that. Now with the Lions, I also liked the Mekhi Wingo pick. Now, this is typically, you might say, but that's an LSU player in the 6th round. That's typically a bad move. Oh, yeah, I know. But you can't just look at the helmet only. There's a reason why Mekhi Wingo fell, and that's because he was undersized. Okay? That's why he's the reverse Mazi Smith. I love tackles like this because what you're betting on is that he can gain 15 pounds. So if he goes out and puts on 15 pounds and is a pleasant surprise in camp instead of a disappointment coming in 30 pounds lighter, then all of a sudden you have a guy that would have been a day 2 pick. That's what you want. If a guy's going to be 6 foot, 284, and profile as sort of a practice squad type player, if you like the overall skill set, just draft him and hope that he can put on weight, because sometimes they do, and then those are the late round picks that exceed expectations, and they become rotational starters for 10 years. I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but you shouldn't be. What I don't appreciate is when these teams swing for stars in the 6th round. The Stephon Diggs play is so rare. Just take a guy that's going to be a productive rotational asset, and that's where the Lions are. This is the beauty of it. I mean, it takes 8 years to do this, but eventually you get to a point where you take guys in the 6th round that are just going to straight up help your team, help your franchise, help your roster get better, and that's it.
I think when you look at it too, we don't talk a ton about building a culture on this show because obviously it's much more transactional, but you find guys, right? We were talking about earlier, Adisa Isaac, that's a Baltimore Raven. Yeah, true. Shout out Warren, good dude. But one of the things in terms of building a culture is you find guys like, for example, Wingo. You don't think he's going to get better going against Penei Sewell and those glass eaters on that O-line all day? And the edge rushers, you don't think he's going to get a bump from playing next to Aiden Hutchinson and flying around with all these DBs that they've got? Sometimes it's just easy to find a guy that pushes in, right? It's just like, we're doing things my way. Sean Payton. Brad Holmes came into Detroit, and him and Dan Campbell have decided together, this is what we're about. We're going to be a tougher team than you. We're going to put speed on the perimeter, and we're going to win inside out. We're going to win the run game. We're going to win with our slot receivers and our tight ends and Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we're just going to flip this whole thing on its head. And what they've done is give you a blueprint when not everything goes right. It took them time to build that O-line. They got Jared Goff in a trade where they traded their franchise savior in Matthew Stafford. They built the defense out. This defense was bad, actively bad, as little as 2 years ago. And now you're talking about, DB being the one real area of concern for this team. They address it back to back early with picks that probably were values based on where they got them. This is one of the very few scenarios where you sit there and you say everything aligned perfectly for them. And all they had to do was go push the button on Terry and Arnold, push the button on Ennis Rakestraw. And suddenly this entire roster, now you're looking at it, we said NFC North champions. We might be talking Super Bowl champions for the Lions in the next couple of years if they keep stacking chips like this.
Green Bay. I don't have a strong opinion.
It's an interesting draft. This is the benefit of having hit on Jordan Love. Like, we don't have questions about Jordan Love anymore, Matt. Do you have any questions about if Jordan Love can ball?
I think he can play.
I think he can play, man. And they've fucking done it again. So you're sitting here in your Green Bay, and, again, this is what we advised Buffalo to do, exactly what Green Bay did a couple years ago, where you double or triple dip wide receiver in day 2 and 3. And they didn't. Instead, they took Coleman, which is fine. Good for you, I guess. And yes, to me, Jordan Morgan at 25 or 26, wherever they took him, 25, sorry, was a little bit of a reach for me, but good player. Like, it's hard to complain about. Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker from A&M.
Yeah, a guy like Jordan Morgan, you want him to gain at least 10 pounds, maybe 20.
Yep. To me, he was more of an early day 2 guy than a late day 1 guy.
He's a day 2 guy. So they're taking day 2 guys in the first round. They're taking day 3 guys in day 2. Marshawn Lloyd, he's a 4th rounder. He's not a 3rd rounder. Come on. You know what I mean? You're taking an undersized middle linebacker in the 3rd round in Tyron Hopper. I don't like it. So I don't like it. I think this is one of those drafts that falls into the 20s, not because they went meat and potatoes. I already have established my credibility as loving meat and potatoes drafts. I just don't like these particular potatoes and this particular meat.
It's a perfectly fine draft to me. There's
perfectly
nothing
fine. It's fine. Yeah. But it's fine is like draft 21 on the rankings. What about Houston?
When you hit the way they hit on last year's draft, it's
doesn't matter.
This year just feels like surplus, right? Like, it just feels like the Texans won the lottery last year, and now we're just
safety, tackle, corner. They try to improve their secondary. That's what they know is you never can have enough linemen, right? So with Blake Fisher, they get line depth from Notre Dame, and then they're going after safeties and corners, and then just bolstering their roster. I did like Marcus Harris because he's another guy where he can gain weight, right? And so I has good pass rushing ability for a D tackle. So there were a couple of, but again, if I'm going for tackle, defensive tackle, that's my only move would be to go 6th, 7th round. Can this guy gain weight? And so I did like that. But again, no 1st round pick, so hard to really get super excited about it. It's just on a per pick basis. I think it was good, and it was just sort of, it must be nice.
Yeah.
Right, must be nice to be able to have this kind of draft and feel so set up. And this was a rebuild that happened much faster than I expected, and I was wrong about Houston. I did not see them rebuilding this quickly. I thought that they needed more time before they brought in a quarterback, and they said, no, we're going to just stick and pick on C.J. Stroud, and it was the right move. And they knew their roster better than the Podfather, and so I tip my cap to Houston. They also have an older owner, and I'm glad that she might see a championship. Indianapolis.
The Texans are an interesting one. Indy is, man, this is the most Chris Ballard draft. Like, of any of the drafts that we've ever seen the Colts make, this may be the most Chris Ballard draft of all time.
Guy, all he does is just be great. I mean, Chris Ballard, I love him.
I love him
stopped
too.
The Adonai Mitchell slide because he's like, enough already. He's like, we already have Alec Pierce. We already have Josh Downs. We don't need but this is, you guys are being idiots.
What are you doing? Yeah.
You guys are idiots. Like, just because this guy doesn't fit a particular positional need in your wide receiver room doesn't mean he shouldn't have been drafted 20 picks ago. Fools. We'll just pick him, right? And also, it's the other thing. All these general managers, or I shouldn't say all general managers, I would say, maybe half, they're drafting as if they're not going to have injuries. That's the other thing that really bothers me with the need-based. You're assuming all your guys are going to be healthy, right? Like Carolina not drafting Adonai Mitchell. You think Adam Thielen's going to play 17 games and Deontay Johnson's going to play 17 games? What? All these, you're just assuming? No, you take the player who is the best player at the scarcest position typically on the board. That is something that Chris Ballard does better than anyone. It's just closing his eyes and going, okay, Latu has incredible upside. He's a guy that would have been potentially a top 5 pick in another world. So we're doing it. Mitchell, a first rounder, right? He just is like, this guy, we may even have an edge we like, but you can't have enough edge. You can't have enough tackle, right? Matt Concalves, Matt G. So
Matty G.
Matt Goncalves, Matty G. So they got Matty G, 330-pound tackle, shirt barely, covers his stomach, in the 3rd round. Who doesn't love that pick? Best available tackle on the board, period, at that time. Easily. Nasty. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go and they get a center with a mullet from Wisconsin in the 4th round. I mean, pinch me.
Yeah.
Pinch me. Tanner Bordanini. I mean, his name should be Banner Tortellini. This guy looks like he eats tortellinis for every meal. This is perfect. This is exactly what I want on my team.
If you're gonna draft a center, draft a Wisconsin center. If you're gonna draft a tight end from Iowa.
Just a glorious mullet.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow. And
fun player.
Even Micah Abraham is a nice pick.
Marshall.
We're gonna go corner late.
We are.
Just a guy with great instincts. See what happens. Same thing with the Jalen Simpson. Great instincts.
Good player.
Just a ball hawk. Just a bunch of ball hawks in the 5th round. He went double down on safety in the 5th round. Nothing I love more. Well, I shouldn't say that. I love a lot of things, but I like 5th round safeties.
Me too.
I love 5th round safeties. They hit. And when they hit, they're 10-year starters, and Chris Ballard understands this. This guy understands positional value. Oh, God, does he understand it. 2nd round, that's where you get your receivers.
Yeah. Last year.
15th pick,
remember?
that's where you get your edge rusher. It's just so good.
And people are going to talk about how, they haven't won the division in so long. Bro, that division's been – there are a lot of really good teams in that division in that
it's
era.
Murder.
The Titans were a 1 seed.
Murder. I mean, think about
years.
the difference now between the NFC South and the AFC South.
The NFC South is a bunch of kids shooting each other with squirt guns, and the AFC South is preparing for war.
That's right. Actual mechanized infantry. That's what the AFC South is. And again, it's just fucking squirt guns in the NFC South. It's a joke. The NFC South is a joke, and you have to be deadly serious if you want to win games in the AFC South now.
Mm-hmm.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Jacksonville, what do you think about their draft?
I have so many questions about what the direction of this team is. Only because, they make weird decisions. Like, you trade for Calvin Ridley to let him walk because the Titans, your division rival, want to pay him $30 million. Okay, like, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do that, I guess. But it's just, to me, the weirdest part about how they've built this is it's like, you threw Trevor Lawrence in a cave in the 1 year with Meyer. You know, he had to dig himself out of there. Learned a lot of bad habits that year. And then last year, you had a receiver room that on paper looked pretty good. You know, we're sitting there and we're like, oh, you know, what do we think about Jacksonville's receiver room? Yeah, well, I mean, they have some fun pieces in Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. You know, we'll see what happens. Then Evan Ingram turns into a target hog at tight end, which I don't know that anybody other than Coop saw coming. Shout out to Andrew. he called that one. And so now you're replacing him with Brian Thomas Jr., who I like a lot. But the weirdness of the rest of this is so strange. They double dip at corner, triple dip at D tackle, triple dip at defensive tackle. Do you think that they identified that as an area of need? Mason Smith at 48, Jordan Jefferson, teammates at LSU. And they took Javon Foster, so they didn't triple dip. But this is just a weird draft to me. I have no idea what to do with it. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's just kind of there. Like, I want to talk about drafts that we love, and this one's just kind of like okay, well, you click the button on a couple of these guys.
Don't they need a corner?
I would say they probably needed a corner.
Don't they? I mean, what? I mean, I understand they waited until the 5th round. Oh, no, they took Jerrion Jones in the 3rd round. Okay. I don't agree with any of their picks because they get it backwards, right? Imagine what Chris Ballard would have done, okay? Chris Ballard would have gone Terrion Arnold with the 23rd pick, 10,000,000%. And guess who did go Terrion Arnold with the very next pick? Brad Holmes, right? I hated the Brian Thomas pick, and it made it even worse that they could have had Adonai Mitchell, right, in the 2nd round. So if you go and you replay it, this is the problem. You're like, oh, you're using hindsight bias. That's not fair. You can't use hindsight bias. This is not hindsight. This is just what we would have done at the time because I don't like taking a receiver as a reach at that particular position. That guy is often, there's a CeeDee Lamb and there's a Justin Jefferson out there, but for every CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, there's Ruggs and Devontae Parker. And it's a laundry list of bust receivers. It's very dangerous to go receiver there. And there's no need to, especially when you can get a premium high floor corner that you need is an area of need for you. More of a need than wide receiver, right? So go Terrion Arnold there, and then you have Adonai Mitchell falling into your lap, and then you can, instead of drafting Mason Smith, 2 A's in Mason for some reason, then in the 3rd round, you could go edge. See, that would have been the right cadence of positions to go, but this is what the Jacksonville Jaguars do. This is how they keep losing ground to the other teams. This is how. You want to know how it happened, where they were projected to win the division and then they didn't, and then all of a sudden every year they're like not able to be on level playing field with the Colts and the Texans, and they keep falling behind incrementally year over year. It's these choices that they make. It's where you're giving up value round by round, slowly but surely your franchise leaks value, and you're never going to capitalize on having Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. I openly said that I'm not the biggest Trent Baalke guy, but this is why. This is exactly why. If you keep drafting based on need, eventually you're going to have more needs than one draft class could fill.
That's it.
That's how you enter a rebuild that you didn't intend to.
That's it. That's exact. That perfectly said. We are not going to talk about all 32 teams. We're going to have a part 2 to this show. Maybe next week. We'll see what happens. Probably next week. Let's wrap it up. One more team. So we get halfway through the teams. Here we go. Chiefs.
They really let him do it, man. They let him push the button. I can't believe they let him push the button.
I mean, if Jacksonville really wanted the best receiver on the board, they could have gone Xavier Worthy, but they didn't.
They didn't.
And all these teams just let it happen. They just sat there and they let it happen. They just watched. They didn't speak up. They didn't make a move. They didn't even fight back at all. All these teams just got cucked.
It's the Brett Veach, first of all, I don't think outside of KC gets as much love as he should for the moves that he makes in terms of keeping the Chiefs. Whether that's, O-line, D-line help, whether that's the way that they draft DBs and develop those guys. I mean, there's so much value across this roster. Obviously, having Pat helps tremendously. But the thing that's terrifying about Worthy is we have seen the super freak speedster in KC before, playing next to Travis Kelce. I'm not saying that he's going to be Tyreek Hill, but if he gets a role similar to what they had Tyreek do, is there a better landing spot possible for Xavier Worthy than Casey?
No, of course not. No. Of course not. And they did the thing. Like this was like a great pick, solid. It's a high floor pick, actually. It feels like a high ceiling pick. It's not. It's a high floor pick. This is just going to be a great skill match with Patrick Mahomes out of the gate. And then you're going to have a base of field stretching and big plays that is guaranteed. And then can he become a Tyreek Hill level player? We don't know. That's the upside. But there's actually a high floor there. Then the next pick is more of an upside pick. This Kingsley Suamanatia. Right? I mean, this guy, you could see it. He could be a first rounder. You could look back in a couple of years, being he's one of the best tackles from this class.
Yep. And there were many people that did have him as one of the best tackles in this class. So the fact that they let him fall all the way to 63 is kind of crazy. I did not foresee him being available there. I honestly didn't think he would last much past the 50s.
Yeah, and getting depth behind Travis Kelce.
Jared Wiley is a fun one.
With just a smart play, a great pick. Just, oh my God, just good pick after they got a 210-pound safety.
Jaden Hicks was one of the players from Washington State. A lot of people had him as the best safety in this class, and they get him in the 4th round.
And to wrap it up, Anand, we got to wrap it up. Their 7th round pick. A beefy guard. Was this beefy guard CJ Hansen, Anand? This beefy guard, was he from Ohio State? Was he from Michigan? No. Was he from Alabama, LSU, Clemson?
Nope.
Tell the people where this beefy guard the Chiefs got in the 7th round. Just a perfect pick.
The funniest part, before I tell you where he's from, the funniest part about this is the idea of Brett Veach searching for the all 22 here to watch this guy. It's from the College of Holy Cross. From
the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, world famous draft kit, rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.